afternoon. No, good evening, everybody. Keith Engle here for TGI Sports Talks College Sports Huddle. We're beginning back into some football as we go forward. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. A lot of basketball news to finish up with the Final Four. The final, I should say. Final Four in the final. Coach Cal is gone from Kentucky. Kentucky is probably very happy to see that. We'll see whether the fans in Arkansas are as happy. We'll get into that. We'll get into some other conversations, surrounding all of the college basketball news. We'll get into some college football conversation, maybe a little bit look at the draft possibilities, some of the rankings that are out and where some teams might go. We'll go anywhere you guys want to go, as always. Want to thank everybody watching us tonight on TGI Sports Talk's Facebook page, on YouTube, on Twitter. Sorry, I don't, what do we call it now? It's still Twitter to me, I guess. We're on Northeast Streaming Sports. We'll repeat this show at midnight tonight and 9 on Saturday on their Roku channel. But we are live on Facebook and YouTube there as well, and live with Let's Talk Sports YouTube platform as well. And thumbs up DDH. Quick shout out to Ralph Williams at RW Media, who does some great stuff there in Pittsburgh. A Pittsburgh spin, but a national coverage at times as well for Ralph, and specifically the sports corner that he does with Smokin' Jim Frazier every Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on WBVP radio. So check that out. Ralph often pops into this show, and we'll give him another shout out or give him a chance as well. We'll talk about all of the basketball news, anything you guys want to get into, whether it's UConn's two-peat, can they go for three? We'll talk about the women's Final Four as well. I didn't mention Caitlin Clark loses in her final collegiate game, doesn't get the title. Will that keep her from being the GOAT? And some other things. Congratulations to both UConn and South Carolina, to Bobby Hurley and Dawn Staley. Quick shout out too. We're going to have a little format change on Fridays, and I'll get into this in more detail Friday morning. But we're going back to our one-on-one interviews. First one will be this Friday, but it will not be at 9 o'clock in the morning. It'll be at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with Marty Cardova, former Rookie of the Year in the American League in 1995 with the Twins, and had a very good major league career. Injuries kind of derailed a little bit. We'll get into all of that with Marty. That will be at a different time at 3 o'clock this week only. This Friday at 9 a.m., I'll be on myself. Maybe with Mad New Yorker will join me to say goodbye. Are You Serious is gone, at least from TGI Sports Talk. The name belongs to the Mad New Yorker, Carlos Chavez, as he brought it to the show. And if he wants to continue that, he certainly can. And we'll talk to him if he wants to pop on about what his future might be. We'll have him for a little bit, and then we'll talk about what the format will look like. And I'm excited. We got some great guests lined up already. Some great former major leaguers, some hockey player anyway. And I got a lot. We're probably booked through May already. So we'll talk more about that on Friday. Let's see who's with us here tonight so far. Let's see Danny Fuller. This should be good. I'm not sure what that's for, but we welcome you, Danny, out there in the West Coast. He might be talking about the Cal move. I don't know. If we're talking about Cal, man, he gets out in front of the posse. Watch out for the NCAA to show up on Lexington campus of Kentucky soon. Brackets? Oh, I'm sorry. I got to jump into the bracket here. Let me do this real quick for Rick. Congratulations to Rick, by the way. Rick does. I should have pulled it up. My bad. I wasn't trying to demean your accomplishment. I was horrible. Rick Sherlock, a loyal follower of this show, and one of one of my favorite Perthites out there. I'm trying to pull up the. I can't get into. You know what? Did they take it down on me or something? Anyway, Rick and Kenny Gifford finished 1 and 2, the Perthites, in the both the men's bracket pool and the women's bracket pool. Congratulations to them. Rick picked the winner in both brackets. Great job. Keith finished last, I think, or second to last in both. So maybe you guys ought to host a show one week and go from there. Daniel Barry, Sports Highlights. How you doing, buddy? Good to have you with us. Anytime you want to post something to promote your stuff, Daniel, we'd be happy to have you do that as well. John Cheater Calipari to Arkansas. Sad for who? Kentucky fans are happy. Listen, talking about Calipari for a second, and we'll get into more of that. Calipari, I think he's a good coach. He's a great recruiter, or he's had great recruiters. I mean, his number one I don't think it's any mystery. Kentucky hasn't been out of the first round out of the first weekend since 2019. 2 of those years they were out in the first round. I don't think it's any mystery that the talent pool has gone down a bit at Kentucky since Kenny Payne, who just got fired at Louisville, left the coaching staff. He was his big recruiter. He went to the Knicks, if you remember, to work for Tom Thibodeau around 2018 or 2019, when the talent pool started to drop at Kentucky. Now, in fairness to John Calipari, he's not a bad in-game coach. You don't take UMass to the Final Four. I know there was recruiting allegations, Marcus Camby, blah, blah, blah. He did go to Memphis and win there, get to the Final Four. Probably should have won a championship there as well. The NCAA, again, I've said this forever. If they want you, they'll get you. And they've always had it out for John Calipari. They've never had anything on him at Kentucky, though. So we'll see. You know, I've always laughed at that he's always been ahead of the posse. If you remember, he left UMass for the Nets before any kind of violations were or sanctions were brought down on UMass, and he left Memphis for Kentucky before the bottom fell out there. But I don't think we've had the same kind of allegations here. John Calipari's failures, I think, is the fact that the one-and-done model isn't working. It worked for a while, but teams are figuring out, and we talked about this a little while ago, the Jay Wright system at Villanova, 3-4 star players, maybe a 5-star here and there you bring in late in his career, but kids that are going to stick around and get better and better, and you build your program around longevity. I don't know if I want to say longevity, building towards something, if you will. It's starting to look like that's what it is. UConn had some seniors that contributed. Purdue, obviously, Eddie stuck around for 4 years. We'll see. Arkansas, this is not a bad move for Arkansas. Eric Musselman had moved on to go to USC. We might talk about it a little bit tonight, USC and Bronny there. He's both in the transfer portal and in the NBA draft, and he's not getting drafted. So he'll be in the transfer portal going back somewhere next year. And his dad needs to leave him, stay out of it, LeBron. But I think bad Coach Cal gets a bit of a bad rap as a game coach. Now, you can blame him a lot the last 5 years, I guess now, going back to 19. So anyway, we'll get into that more. Kentucky on probation coming next, only my guess. It's possible. Again, as I've said, there's been no he's been there 15 years, don't forget. He was much longer than he was at either UMass or Memphis, and the NCAA hasn't found anything, but maybe they have. Here's the thing. This works out for Kentucky. Kentucky would have to pay him $33 million. Now they don't have to pay him anything. Plus they get a buyout from Arkansas. So Kentucky becomes the winner here. It's going to be interesting to see who the next coach is. And I find it interesting that they're already people are turning them down. Bobby Hurley has said he was not interested. Danny Hurley has said he was not interested. Nate Oates from Alabama said he's happy at Alabama. Now, we've had coaches say these things, and all of a sudden they're coaching somewhere else. Their home run is Billy Donovan, who had a great run at Florida before he went to the NBA, and he's now with the Bulls. He says he's fully committed to the Bulls, but we'll see. I think Bryce Drew would be a great fit. Is it Bryce Drew or Scott Drew? That's the one at Baylor. Scott Drew would be a great fit, I think, for Kentucky. I think Nate Oates would do well there. But I think Nate Oates is happy at Alabama. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Congratulations. Rick did a great job. That's what us Perth guys do. We either finish last or we finish first. John Chaney had it out for John as well. Well, that's true. If you remember the great Temple UMass games in the old, they played in the A10, right? I think at the time. Danny, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was the A10. Maybe Chris will remember. I see Chris there too. They had some great battles, and I remember the one night that John Chaney came into and I'm sure that's what Danny Fuller's referring to, is John Chaney came into Calipari's press conference after the game and threatened to kill him. So some great battles there. Listen, Calipari has been a good coach for a long time. A lot of stuff followed him around, but I've always said some of this stuff, I don't think the things that really that Calipari's been involved with that were violations were as serious as some other things that have gone on. And again, they're things that probably everybody has done. Now it's all legal, by the way. You can do whatever you want. So think about it. That's where we've come to. Things that teams were coaches were fired for, coaches and were put on show cause orders, and teams were put on probation for. Teams got the death penalty for in SMU's case in football. You can do all that stuff now. It's totally legal. This is where we've come. Anyway, what I was saying about Calipari is, if they want you bad enough, I don't care who you are, they'll find something. And Calipari's always been a guy who rubs people the wrong way and makes them want to find something. And they always did. And Danny, you know what? They may find something now, too. Chris, good evening. How are you tonight? Will Notre Dame be covered in college football talk? Always. Notre Dame is always a hot topic here. In fact, Notre Dame can be a hot topic now because, listen, we're going to finish up our college basketball talk. There'll still be a little bit with coach movement and whatnot. But and some baseball talk, as we do have some college baseball fans, and I like to keep up on what's going on. And good friend Larry Sorensen is a color commentator at Wake Forest. We like to keep Wake Forest baseball up to date. But Notre Dame, I was shocked the other day. I want to bring this, since you're a big Notre Dame fan, outside of the CFL. I just can't figure out. I can't figure out any game I should get excited about when they score a point for missing a field goal. Anyway, I have watched Canadian football, and I have liked it at times. When Doug Flutie was there, I watched a lot. I liked watching Warren Moon up there. There were a couple other players that I followed a little bit years ago. I haven't followed it in quite a while, quite frankly. But speaking of Notre Dame, Chris, their athletic director said they're still sitting in a catbird seat being an independent. And I don't see how that is. I mean, they don't have as easy a path to the college football playoff as you might think. Money-wise, they get $25 million a year, I believe, from NBC. Now, maybe that price will be going up because I think that contract is coming up soon. But the Big Ten, those teams are all getting 60, close to $70 million each from the TV deal. The SEC is close to that and probably will exceed it once that's renegotiated. That's outside of the college football playoff. Now, they do have the advantage of when they go to a bowl game or the college football playoff, they don't have to share that money with anybody, and the rest of the schools do. But still, I don't see how it's a great advantage today to be an independent in the way the playing field is laid out today. Scheduling will get to be difficult, right? They should have stayed in the ACC when they had a chance. And the ACC had a chance to put their foot on their throat when during COVID, when Notre Dame was begging them to get in the conference so they could play a season. And they said, we only want to come for 1 year. The ACC should have held them over a barrel and said, well, if you're coming now, you're coming for good. But that didn't happen. So we'll see. We talk a lot of Notre Dame though, as well. And I'll say this, Marcus Freeman, I think, has gotten a bad rap his first couple of years. I think he's a good football coach. He's a football coach still in training, head football coach still in training. I think it's still the right hire for Notre Dame. And I think they're going to be very happy with Leonard coming up there to be their quarterback next year. Danny talking about coaches going out, which we'll get into that coaching carousel a little bit. Cronin might be the next out. I'm a little surprised, Danny. I mean, here we are into April, right? We've played the entire NCAA tournament, of which UCLA did not make it. I don't believe they played the NIT. If they were going to fire Mitch Cronin, why would they have not already have done it? Especially when all these other teams have made these moves and the coaches have been flying all over the board. So I think it seems to me a little strange that they would make this move this late if they haven't already. Now, you're closer to that situation probably than I am as far as news-wise. Dave Guyette, good evening. Big Syracuse fan. Sorry. Just nice text from not from my granddaughter, who's 19 months old, but about her. And it always makes me a little emotional, believe it or not. So anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, Dave Guyette, big Syracuse fan. Autry had a decent year. They had a nice run at the end of the year to get close to the bubble, at least in the NCAA tournament. Didn't quite get there, but maybe Autry will be fine. Jerry McNamara now has left his bench to be a longtime assistant also to Jim Boeheim, has left to become the new Siena coach here in the Albany area. Chris, tradition can tear down the best of a man. Notre Dame staying independent. I don't know how they can continue. I mean, there's two. How many independents are left here? Hold on. Let me go to college football here. I think there's two independent teams left, if I'm right. I don't know if this will show me the right. No, I take it back. There's still no Army's going. This isn't right. This is last year. Army's going to the American Conference. UConn, I do believe, is still an independent, and I think UMass. So independence used to be a very strong segment in college sports in general, in football and basketball, both. You think about Notre Dame, you think about Marquette, you think ball, you think about Miami and football. Trying to think of some others as well. The Army, obviously, and Navy for a long time were independents. So the independence is gone everywhere, it seems, in society. But we'll get into all that. Let's talk a little bit. Let me just recap, and we can go anywhere you want tonight. As I said, I want to recap real quickly what happened in the men's and women's Final Fours as well. We'll get back into more Coach Cal talk, more coach chatter, some NFL draft talk if you want. That is still, to me, college. These kids are still college until they're drafted. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in this upcoming draft. Some of these guys. I saw Michael Penix as high as 13 here today in a mock draft, and as low as a third rounder. McCarthy. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off the beaten track here. NCAA men. Let's go back to Saturday real quick. Really, the games, UConn and Alabama was a really good game. It was a 14-point victory for UConn. Alabama kept this game really close for a long while, as I thought they would. They're a really good team. They're very well coached. They got some good performances from Nelson, who I like a lot. It's going to be interesting to see as his body fills out, whether he becomes even a better player. But he had 19 points, 15 rebounds in this game. Sears had a good game for them. Estrada was good. Problem, bench. In 51 minutes, they had 6 points off the bench. That's not going to do it. Although, in all fairness, in 40 minutes, UConn only had 7 points off their bench. But their lineup is much deeper than anybody else's, and that's why. You saw in this Alabama game, Klingon just took over, in my mind. And that was the reason that they pulled away at the end. He was all over the floor. He runs the floor well. I think he's a better prospect, and he's probably going to go pro from the sounds of it. I think and I don't want to take anything away from Zach Edey, but I think he's a better pro prospect than Edey. He's much more athletic, although Edey was more athletic than I thought he might be as I watch him in his Final Four, specifically Monday night. But Klingon just has it all. This kid comes from the top of the keys, coming to block shots under the basket. Just very good guard play for Newton and Spencer, just all over the court. And Danny Hurley, I don't know why I keep doing that. He's a good coach, but Bobby Hurley, he did it again. Danny Hurley he's starting to get a little bit too much histrionics on that sideline. You saw it Monday night, where he interacted. The coach shouldn't be out there interacting with opposing players, and he did it with Zach Edey. And he's had some instances of interacting with fans on the road 3 different times this year in the Big East. So maybe something to keep an eye on. But all in all, a pretty impressive performance. Alabama acquitted themselves very well, I thought. But it was just too much Connecticut. They trailed more in this tournament, or this game, by the way, than they have the last 2 tournaments combined. North Carolina State, the slipper fell off them. Burns didn't have a good night, shot just 4 for 10, got 8 points and 1 rebound for the Wolfpack. DJ Holm had a nice game with 20 points, but too much Purdue. Zach Edey had another big game, 20 points, 12 rebounds, even 4 assists. 9 of 14 shooting. Too much. The guards played very well. Where they didn't play, and we'll talk about that in a second, they didn't play well at all Monday night. Lawyer and Jones combined for 25 points in this game, and I'm sorry, Smith too. They play a 3-guard offense, so their guards actually combined for 28 points and 18. I want to say 18 assists. That's wrong. 8 assists. So adjusting to my new glasses, so it's hard. Every time you get a new pair of glasses, when you wear progressive lenses, like as I do, it's always difficult finding the right place to look again. So I apologize for any faux pas on my part. So you got the matchup. The 2 best teams in the country did play on Monday night. I thought this would be a better game. I was kind of rooting for Matt Painter, as I said. He kind of got the monkey off his back, getting further in the tournament than they've ever gotten, getting to the Final Four, first time since 1980. Purdue's been there, only the second time ever. But Monday night, Hurley's strategy and UConn strategy. Let Zach Edey get his points, but nobody else is going to score. Edey had 37, 15 to 25, but they shut everybody else down. But Smith had 12 points and 8 assists. They got nothing from Lawyer and Jones. 5 points combined. 4 points from Kaufman. 2 points from the bench. 2 points from the bench. UConn at least doesn't play their bench. 39, 40, 52, 55 minutes. 2 points. Great job by the UConn defense. 75-65 was the final here. Klingon, as I mentioned, had 11 and 5. I think it was a nice, interesting battle to see two true centers kind of go at it. Newton and Castle were very good in this game. Again, Spencer was good. The bench, pretty much, again, a non-entity. They only played 25 minutes or so combined compared to what Purdue did in 50-plus minutes, 2 points. And at least they had 13 points off the bench for UConn. 9 by Daria. This is just a well-coached team, a well-put-together team. They lost their 2 best players off of last year's team, and they came back and they won this tournament. So they go back-to-back, first time since Florida in the mid-2000s, the mid-aughts, if you will. Now the question is, can they become the first team to three-peat since the great UCLA teams of the 70s, 60s, and 70s? They only ran off like a 10 out of 12 or something. 10 out of 11, maybe. So great stories. And the women, we know that UConn, some great storylines. We had Caitlin Clark playing against UConn in the Final Four, and Gina Auriemma, a place she wanted desperately to go to school growing up, never recruited her. So you had that great storyline. A lot of angst about a call late in the game, a moving pick. It's a penalty. If it's a penalty in the first quarter, it's a penalty at the end. And stop. The conspiracy theorists who have taken over like the NFL these days, who think everything is scripted, just stop. And if it was a bad call, it was a bad call. I'm okay with human error. To me, it was a good call. And I know UConn had it called 3 other times in that game. Iowa didn't get any calls, but I don't know if I really saw moving picks on the Iowa side. So great job by them getting to the final. And South Carolina handled North Carolina. Dawn Staley is a great coach at South Carolina. This is a team that could have been playing for a three-peat if it wasn't for Iowa knocking them out in the semis last year. They handled business pretty effectively. Caitlin Clark did not play well in the final. Too many turnovers, too many forced shots in my mind. Maybe too much pressure for her. And now the question becomes, is she really the GOAT in women's college basketball? She doesn't have a title to her name. Can you be the GOAT without a title? And how will she fare? 2 things. She's got the summer coming up where she was offered by one of the Ice picks, the Ice Cubes, the Ice Teas, whoever. I'm sorry. Don't write me letters, please. She's been offered $5 million to play roughly 10 games, I think, in the 3-on-3 league. That's comprised of all men, as far as I know, this summer. I would take the money and then go play in the WNBA afterwards. So she's going to be the first pick. The Indiana team has the first pick. Will this popularity help the WNBA, which is in the toilet when it comes to rankings, TV contracts, ratings, I should say, TV contracts, and people in the seats? Can Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, there'll be a rivalry started there. It's already started here in college. Will that carry over? Is this a Bird Magic thing? Can the women capitalize on this like the men did in 1979? Those 2 guys saved the NBA. Excuse me, hold on. Sorry about that. A little acid reflux today. All right, what do you got here? A couple comments here. That's 2 more points in Iowa's women's bench. Yep. It's going to be interesting to see what Iowa does and how they roll it back. By the way, I know that I did a mea culpa last week, and I'll do it again this week. I did it all weekend. I kind of poo-pooed the women and their popularity in passing the men, at least in the moment. But it came true. 18 million watched the final of UConn and South Carolina women's final. 14 million watched the men. Women topped off at 24 million people at their high point. Congratulations to them. Can they carry on that momentum past now? Because the storylines of this year, I think, have really carried them. The whole LSU Angel Reese debacle, if you will, and Kim Mulkey, sorry. The Caitlin Clark story, obviously. South Carolina going undefeated. That drove this interest and this peak of the interest. And it'll be interesting to see if they can maintain that momentum going forward, in my mind, anyway. By the time the championship game is on for basketball, by the time the championship game is on for basketball, it is going to compete for ratings versus the Stanley Cup. It's possible. They did improve the ratings this year, by the way, over last year by a small percentage to 14 million. You know, we're never going to get the viewership that we saw back in the 70s. You know, capping, I think, with that Bird Magic, I think is still the highest rated final of all time because you got more choices. I mean, you don't have 3 channels on your TV anymore. You can't start these games, though, at 9:20 at night. Please. There's no reason that game couldn't have started at 8:20. So I'm beyond understanding why I got to stay up till 11:30 at night. Now, maybe the guy on the West Coast is mad because, you know, he's got to rush home from work. I'll rush home from work. Is Caitlin Clark destined for endorsement deals? I'm not sure. Chris. I mean, again, this hasn't carried over from college to the pros very well, in my mind. You've had great women player come into the WNBA, and they have not been grabbed up by Madison Avenue. I'm trying to think of the women's basketball player, professional basketball player, who's dominated the marketing world. Lisa Leslie, Rebecca Lobo, Sue Bird, who I like a lot, and I think might have been one of the best women to play professionally. And I think Caitlin Clark's game is a lot like Sue Bird's. None of these people have really capitalized in the marketing world or the endorsement world, but none of them have had the type of spotlight on them that Caitlin Clark has had. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on Caitlin Clark coming into the WNBA. I'd be shocked if she's not the number 1 pick, right? Unless she pulls an Eli Manning and finds a way to get herself, you know, to the New York or the LA franchise. There's going to be a lot of pressure on her to put this league on her back and also perform well. Because don't forget, you know, the NCAA and the popularity is one thing, and the game is not all 5 of those girls out there are all great players. They were on South Carolina. They weren't on Iowa. And you're going to go up and play against 5 really, really good players every single night. Not 1, not 2, 5. It's going to be Caitlin Clark's going to have a lot of pressure on her next year and the next couple of years to pick this up. Stanley Cup wins over NCAA? Not yet, I don't think. Let me just check the ranking, the ratings for the last Stanley Cup. I'm going to guess it's in single digits. Let's see. Are the ratings down for the Stanley Cup? 2.6 million viewers for the Vegas 4-1 win over Florida. 2.6 million viewers. It's not even close, Danny. 2.6 million. If I'm not mistaken, I think this up here, the highest rating was back in, I want to say this is the highest rating ever. 12.4 million watched Chicago and Montreal in 1971. I don't know. West Coast wins. Yeah, I know. Why? But why, Danny? Why? Why can't you get out of work an hour early rather than me lose, an hour and a half of sleep? Because I'm old. I need my sleep. You can get out of work early, dude. Stop to a bar on the way home. Drive the rest of the way home at halftime. Whatever. These games don't need to start at 9:20. Hello, CA. How are you today? Good to have you with us. Oh, what else you guys got on your mind about college basketball for a flip the switch? 7:37. We talked to you about UConn. Can they repeat? I don't see any reason they won't. I do believe Klingon will leave. Klingon will leave, and they'll probably lose another 1 or 2 players in the NBA. But Danny Hurley's done a great job of, and he did it this year, of reloading that roster. So, listen, don't count them out next year. I probably will, because I'll say how hard it is, because nobody's done it for 50 years. Zach Edey on the next level. I think Edey will be. I think he'll have a role in the NBA. Do I think he'll be a star? Probably not. Showed me a little bit more athleticism in this Final Four, and specifically Monday night, than I thought he had. But he's still going up against the guys that are. He needs to put on some weight, as does Klingon. But he's more athletic. I think there'll be a place for Zach Edey. He will not be a superstar in this league. That's just my take there. Can't read my writing there. And by the way, when it comes to Caitlin Clark, again, I don't know where these rumors get started. There's been talk about Portland. There's been talk about Houston taking a flyer on Caitlin Clark in the NBA. Guys, she can't play in the NBA. Let's not fool ourselves, right? Oops, that's what Larry Sorensen. He's not here. So again, stop. She can't play in the NBA. We talked about Coach Cal going to Kentucky. Who do you guys see as next Kentucky coach? A lot of rumors about Rick Pitino. Pitino says he's not interested. I don't think Kentucky wants to revisit Rick Pitino. And Pitino, I think, wants to stay close to New York, where his family is. And I think he's dedicated to turning St. John's around. And he's well on his way, because this team probably should have been in this NCAA tournament. They weren't. Don't cry me a river, but they weren't. Well, Coach Cal, listen, people think he's going to Arkansas, and it's like this huge step down. Let's not forget, Eric Musselman, before this year, they had a down year this year. They were in back-to-back Elite Eights and then a Sweet 16 last year. This is a pretty good basketball program. They went to back-to-back championships and won one under Nolan Richardson. 30 years ago, I get. Eddie Sutton had a great track record, a great run there. So Arkansas is not some graveyard of basketball. And I think Coach Cal will have at least initially some success. Will it be any worse than what he's done at Kentucky the last 5 years? Again, he's been out of the first weekend since 2019. 2 of those years he was out in the first round. So we'll see. What are my notes over here? My ratings notes. What is going on coach-wise? Danny claims. Danny, quick question. So, I'm guessing, and again, I didn't hear an answer when I asked you, and I hope I didn't miss it. You think Mitch Cronin will be out still? He'll be next out, and I'm assuming you mean this year. I mean, where's he going to go though? I mean, I shouldn't say that. First of all, it's late. Who are they going to hire? Who do you see? Who would be your dream coach at UCLA today to get them? I don't know. Are they ever going to be able to reach? We've had these conversations before, right? In the 80s, after John Wooden retired, they went through Bartow, who they chased out of town. He lost about 8 games in 2 years. Chased him out of town. Gary Cunningham, Larry Farmer, who I've had on my interview show. Great interview. Great guy, Larry Farmer, by the way. Danny, he's the nicest man in the world, too. Go back in the archives of TGI Sports Talk, and you'll find my Larry Farmer interview. I enjoyed that a lot. I might even get Larry on again because I know he's got a book out within the last year. They had a run with Larry Brown, got to the final against Louisville. And we'd always have these, can anybody restore luster to UCLA? Well, it looked like Larry Brown was going to, and Larry Brown is wanting to do, up and left after that final against UCLA when they lost. Kiki Vanderway. I know my UCLA history, Danny. Then they had another dry spell, right? And who comes in but who's the coach that got them the national championship with Ed O'Brien against that great Nolan Richardson Arkansas team? Who coached Rhode Island before? Oh God. Coached Georgia afterwards. Can you imagine? I can't remember his name now. I know Danny will tell me. Who's going to be the guy? And then, after that, they have a prolonged lull. Steve Lavin was out there, former St. John's coach. Ben Howland got out there and got to, I think, 3 Final Fours in 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, and a final. Couldn't win the big one. They chased him out of town. And I think, I'm trying to think who they had after Howland. I don't think Cronin was right after Howland, was it, Danny? We'll see what Danny's got to say about any of that. CA, Walmart for hogs in the portal. A lot of talk about Coach Cal bringing his recruiting class with him to Arkansas, and maybe even some of the other kids from the roster. We'll see whether that happens or not. And by the way, again, I've tried to stick up for, I don't really have a love for or hate against Calipari. I think he's been an exceptional basketball coach over 3 decades. But in his goodbye message to the fans of Kentucky, he talked specifically about one of the things he was proud of was his players' performance in the classroom. Now, partly because he was bringing in all these one and dones, he's graduated 30 guys there in 15 years. So let's not, there are still great student athletes out there in college sports. John Calipari wasn't recruiting them. Let's just be fair about that. I mean, it's frustrating, isn't it? We look at some of the other. What we got some other job openings. We still got some job openings or not? Eastern Washington's still open. I might get that job. Indiana State is open as Josh Schertz left for St. Louis after a great year this year. Indiana State had a great run in the NIT before they lost to Seton Hall and Shasheen Holloway. Kentucky's job is open, as we know. Florida A&M's job is still open. Let me look at some of these other job hirings that we didn't talk about. I think we talked about Pat Kelsey going to Louisville. I'm not going to cover all these. I'm going to go to some of the bigger ones. Andy Enfeld leaves USC. Bronny's leaving USC. Eric Musselman's on his way in. Eric Musselman is one of the best coaches in the country utilizing the transfer portal. Mark my words, USC may be a factor in the Big Ten next year. Just, again, I don't think they'll win it. I think they'll be a factor, and they'll be on the bubble for the NCAA tournament. Eric Musselman's a very, very underrated coach. So we got him going to USC. Andy Enfeld left to go to SMU in their first year in the ACC. Tall order. Stanford hires Kyle Smith from Washington, as we know. St. Louis, we just said, hired Josh Schertz. Sorry. Oklahoma State hires Steve Lutz. West Virginia hires Darian DeFries, who brings maybe one of the best players in the country along with him and his son. It'll be interesting to see if he can get West Virginia headed in the right direction. DePaul hires Chris Holtzman. What's happened to DePaul? DePaul was one of the great programs in the country under Ray Meyer, and for a few years after that, his son. But they've been like nowhere for 2 decades anyway. Michigan, as we know, hired Dusty May from Florida Atlantic. Had a great run there the last 2 years. Ohio State hired Jake Diebler. USC, I talked about Musselman. Washington hires Danny Sprinkle from Utah State as they head towards the Big Ten. Cal Poly hires Chris Acker as they fired Dan Munson. By the way, I talk about Dan Munson a lot. They fired him, then they had a great run, and they won the tournament, the conference tournament, made the NCAA tournament. They went out. People forget the guy who really put Gonzaga on the map, and I love Mark Few, and I talk really highly of Mark Few. Mark Few didn't put them on the map. Dan Monson did. Then he left for Minnesota. College of Charleston hires Chris Mack, former Louisville head coach. Also coached, I believe, at Xavier, if I'm not mistaken. Siena, as I said, hired Jerry McNamara off of Autry's staff at Syracuse. Drake hires Ben McCullum. Excuse me. Indiana State still open. Missouri State hires Conzo Martin, former head coach, I believe, at Missouri and maybe even Tennessee as well. Didn't do all that well in either one of those stops, so we'll see how that works out. Utah State hired Gerard Calhoun to replace Danny Sprinkle. Arkansas, as we mentioned, John Calipari's coming in there. Vanderbilt hires Mark Byington. Boy, glasses are killing me. Coastal Carolina hires Justin Gray. James Madison hires Preston Spradlin, who replaced John Byington, who did a great job there. He left for Vanderbilt. I might have stayed at James Madison rather than go to Vanderbilt. And Pepperdine hires Ed Schilling to replace Lorenzo Romar. And Washington State hires David Riley to replace Kyle Smith. CA will always relate him to John. We talked about that. That great moment. John Chaney was a great coach at Temple. And listen, Calipari's a great coach at UMass. You think people always, and I read all the time, ask the people at UMass or Memphis how they feel about John Calipari. I guarantee you, despite the fact that their banner had to come down from the rafters for their Final Four appearance, the people at UMass still worship the ground John Calipari walked on, because that team was nowhere. Julius Erving playing there is their only claim to fame, and he took them to a Final Four. And the things that he was accused, and again, I guess they found that he had done, wouldn't even be a blip on the radar today. But John Shanahan going after him at a press conference, threatening to kill him, was one of the great moments in NCAA history. Yeah. And Chris says, as we wrap up basketball and go into football, we'll move. Does that? Yes, we will talk. Does that open the gates for just about college anything? Listen, it's a college sports huddle. You know, I probably name it the football huddle in the beginning, and then I move it to college football basketball huddle. It's really the college sports huddle. You know, I keep it the football huddle so that when I'm talking football and we talk other things besides football, the football groups I share it to don't just totally reject it because, you know, I don't have football in the title. So it is really the sports huddle. We get into a little bit of baseball. I'll look at the rankings here in a little bit before we get done, but I'm happy to talk about whatever sport we can talk about. Girls softball, I know, is big these days. I don't know that much about it, but if we want to talk about it, we'll dive into it, and I'll learn as we go. I like to talk about what people like to talk about, and I want to have an educated opinion, so I will find a way to educate myself. Let me see what other stories are going on here quickly in basketball before I turn the page totally. Because other than talking about some of the transfer portal stuff and coaches, we aren't going to talk a lot of we're not going to talk a lot of NCAA basketball for a while. And by the way, once we get through this spring season, we'll go through the draft. We got spring football coming up very shortly. I think Ohio State, Alabama have their spring games coming up this month, if I'm not mistaken. Last year, we took a little sabbatical once we got through the spring games, and we may do that this year. We'll see how it goes. I'm talking June, July area. Once we got through the College World Series in baseball, we did talk some about that. And we shortened the shows. We didn't always go an hour and a half. We might have gone an hour. Because I don't want to just sit here with nothing to say, right? So we may take a little hiatus for a month or so. We'll see how that goes. But I'll certainly keep you guys informed. But we can talk about whatever you want. We talked about Calipari. One of the other things he said was that Kentucky needs another voice. Everybody in Kentucky knew that. He finally came to the revelation when he got a safe place to land. He wasn't going to just pass up that $33 million that Kentucky would have had to pay him. That's about all I got, I guess, on college basketball. College football. Northwestern is set to play most of their games on the lakefront this year. They got a temporary camp stadium flanking Lake Michigan while reconstruction or whatever takes place to rebuild Ryan Field. So it's going to be interesting to see those games. I think they ought to build by the lake anyway. Northwestern, great job last year. Coach Braun had a great job, maybe the best coaching job in the country. As I thought, with everything going on around that Northwestern program, I thought there'd be no hope for that team to win more than one game last year. And they went to a bowl game, won 7 games, I believe. Great job. And by the way, Pat Fitzgerald, I think, has got a very good chance to win his suit against the NCAA. Despite everything that went on there, Pat Fitzgerald is well respected around the world of college coaching and the world of the NCAA in general. And I think the NCAA is going to pay him tens of millions of dollars for this story to go away. There's a streaming site called Raja Directa. It's packed with all kinds of oddball sports, college stuff, Olympic grooming stuff. What's that mean? Olympic grooming. The grooming word, and again, here in the States, grooming is not a great term to use these days, but I know it's the context that you're talking about. It's probably grooming these athletes to become Olympians, I guess. It's a European site. Highly recommend it for early Sunday morning. We can do that. It's hard. Listen, we did try to do some oddball sports. We talked about tackle basketball on Sundays. We talked about professional pillow fighting, which there's an actual it's an actual thing. So we've talked about some different things, and if you want to bring them up, we'll certainly talk to them. It's hard for me, Danny. I'm old school, and I want to certainly talk about what you guys are interested in talking about. My strengths are in football, baseball, basketball, hockey. I could do a little boxing, a lot of golf. We're going to talk some Masters this weekend, so be prepared. I'll probably talk about it a little bit Friday, early on, and since the tournament will be going on, and Friday's 9:00 show is going to be kind of an orientation of what we'll be doing Fridays going forward. And then remember at 3:00, we've got former Rookie of the Year with the Minnesota Twins, Marty Cordova, as we start our one-on-one series that will air hopefully every Friday at 9 a.m. starting on the 26th, as I've got some surgery, oral surgery, on the 19th, so we won't have show that day. But we'll talk about whatever. SMU can't out money the establishment programs without them chipping you down. Now illegal is legal. Well, that's what I talked about before. Well, like outdoor sports, if anything goes, then anything goes. I talked about it at the beginning of the show a little bit, CA. Again, you can't get caught for speeding, going 70 and a 30 today, and then they raise the speed limit to 70 in a month from now, then say I want my ticket revoked. That doesn't work that way. But it's interesting place that we are in college sports today, that almost everything that has happened, almost everything other than some of the stuff at Baylor with sexual assaults and murders, and a lot of the things that programs have been sanctioned for, have been put on probation for, even got the death penalty for, is just business as usual today. But no, you can't give Reggie Bush his Heisman Trophy back. If he broke rules that were illegal then, you can't give him his trophy back. Sorry, Johnny Manziel, it's not going to happen. What do you got for me, Rick? Tackle basketball comes years too late for me, despite what Kenny might say. There were a few tackle games in Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning. I don't know what. Saturday afternoon, I guess we played basketball. I don't remember exactly what time of day that was, but there was some interesting standoffs, and I certainly face-offs. I remember one specifically with you and our late friend Stanley Corona, Rick. So, oh, Stanley was the best, man. Not the best man. A lot of talk around the NFL draft. As I mentioned, I was looking at the Beast, right? The Beast is the Athletics kind of NFL, I don't know, portal for all things NFL. And the Beast was ranking all the players in the draft. And number one, I think Caleb Williams has been taking it tough, but they rank him number one. So I'm not really sure. I'm not going to do that. That's going to be a pain in the ass. We don't need that. Where is this? How come I can't get into this story? I was in it earlier. Now you don't want to let me in? Is that what we're going to do? I think. Well, then the hell with you. We're not going to use your information. Anyway, couple of talk, some big talk. Caleb Williams, is he going to be the number one pick? Who's going to be two? A lot of people getting on Drake May saying that Daniels is a better risk, if you will, than Drake May. This is why I want the Patriots to get out of this number 3 slot, either taking Marvin Harrison, who I know the Beast had ranked as the second best prospect. I've got him 1. The Beast had Caleb Williams 1. But there's going to be a lot of movement. The 3, 4 spots, the Giants might want to move up. The Vikings might want to move up. Not the Falcons, but the Raiders might want to move up. 2 teams to watch in my mind are going to be the Vikings and the Giants. Both like McCarthy a lot. And it's interesting because he's gone from, late first round, maybe early second round to now top 3 conversation. Michael Penix, I talked earlier. I think the Beast had him going at number 13 to the Raiders. Might the Giants or the Vikings take a shot at Michael Penix earlier than what we projected? There's also projections that have him in the 3rd round. So, in any event, I'm not doing that. Get this out of my way. Let me just check out. There's a lot of stuff going on that's going to be very, very interesting. Top quarterbacks, again, in my mind, if I'm the Patriots, for instance, I Marvin Harrison. But let's look at the top quarterbacks ranked here. This is ESPN rankings. They've got obviously everybody's got Williams at 1. Everybody's got Daniels at 2 or 3, and May in the other spot. McCarthy's moved up to 4. Bo Nix has moved up to 5, but probably mid first round, late first round at best. Spencer Rattler has moved way up since the combine to 7th. Michael Pratt, I talk about on my shows all the time. I love Michael Pratt. I'd love to see the Patriots get him in the 4th or 5th round after taking a wide receiver and maybe some offensive line help before that. They've been talked about a lot, getting out of that 3 spot, either picking Harrison, trading back, and taking offensive lineman or wide receiver first couple of picks, and taking a Pratt or a Rattler later on. And after that, you get into guys like Devin Leary, Milton, Slovis. These guys are not Hartman. These guys, speaking of Notre Dame, Chris, Sam Hartman had a great career at Wake Forest, went with 1 year remaining to go to Notre Dame to try to improve. Well, first of all, put $1 million in his pocket. And second of all, tried to improve his draft status. He's probably no better now than where he was then, would be my guess. Let's see what they project him here. I'm going to say if he's more than a 6th-round pick, I'll be shocked. Overall rank 283. So That tells you where he's ranked. Tight ends, Brock Bowers. A lot of talk about the Jets and Brock Bowers. I think Brock Bowers would be a great pick for the Jets if he's still there when they pick at 10. I know Rick's a big Georgia Bulldog fan. I'm a big Brock Bowers fan. I think he's big enough, 6'3", maybe a little smallish for your tight end, but 243 pounds. He's a great blocker. Excellent, obviously, pass receiver, and I think a great weapon for a guy like Aaron Rodgers on his way back from injuries. Javon Sanders from Texas would be second. Cade Stover from Ohio State would be third. And then the rest of these guys are going to be kind of tight ends are not going to be picked early and often unless you're named Brock Bowers. I mean, after that, Sanders is likely to go in the third round, maybe the second round. Running backs is interesting. After last year, we had Bijan Robinson go fairly early, and I think we had two running backs go in the first round. It kind of looks like this will be more like 2022, where we didn't have any running backs go in the first round. The top-rated running back is Jonathan Brooks from Texas, and his overall rank right now is 42, which would put him right in the middle of first 10 or 12 picks in the second round. Trey Benson from Florida State would be next, and he's all the way down at 60. Blake Corum, who was a great back at Notre Dame, but he's only 5'8", 205 pounds, 67th. Now this will change. Braylon Allen, who had a great career at Wisconsin, 150th. It'll be interesting. Wide receivers, the draft is loaded with wide receivers, starting with Marvin Harrison, I said, but not far behind is Malik Neighbors. His overall rank, 4. Rome Adonis, I never see this guy's name right, sorry. Overall rank, 8. Mitchell from Texas, 23rd. I think he's higher than that. Brian Thomas, I think, might be better than Mitchell, 24. These would all be first-round draft picks of what we're talking about. Leggett from South Carolina, 28. McConkey, another Georgia guy, 31. So that'd be your first round. That could be 5 or 6 first-round picks. Wide receivers. And you might have a surprise, like Keon Coleman might move up into that first round. Roman Wilson from Michigan could move up. Jalen McMillan could move up. Could be interesting. What do you got here? Maybe that gal from Iowa should join the Globetrotters, adding a spark, gender, and color diversity to the team. You know, CA, we talked a lot about Caitlin Clark early. And I think she's going to have a more difficult transition to the WNBA than a lot of people think. I like Caitlin Clark, a great college player, great for the game of basketball, the women's basketball in general, right? She can't play with the men. She'd be an interesting pick for the Globetrotters because we're not playing real basketball. And people want to talk about scripted sports. Well, none is more scripted than the Globetrotters. It would be an interesting, as you said, diversity to the team, both color, gender, and spark. Now, there have been black players that have played for the Globetrotters at different times. I don't think any women have played. I'm not really sure. But there have been some white guys that have played for the Globetrotters here and there. It hasn't been any big influx of them, but that would be interesting, right? Because the Globetrotters have been a historically a black basketball team and have entertained generations of people. I remember as a kid, when the Wide World of Sports would come on, I was disappointed if either the Globetrotters or Evel Knievel wasn't part of the show. So, overall, we look at the overall picks. This is the overall ranking This is from, who is doing this, by the way? I got to believe this is probably Kuiper. Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison, Jaden Daniels third, Malik Neighbors fourth, Joe Alt, offensive tackle from Notre Dame, great player. A lot of talk about him and the Patriots as well, by the way, as well as a bunch of other teams, anywhere from 1 to 10. From Notre Dame, great offensive lineman, great potential offensive lineman. Drake May would be the sixth. Dallas Turner, Alabama, outside linebacker, seventh. Rome Adonis from Washington, 8. Troy Fatanu from Washington, offensive tackle. 9th, Quentin Mitchell from Toledo with a cornerback in the top 10. Brock Bowers at 11. Tight end, J.J. McCarthy, 12. These are just rankings. This is not based on who will pick them necessarily. Teron Arnold from Alabama, cornerback. J.C. Latham, Alabama offensive tackle. Jared Versay from Florida State, defensive end. Did a great job after transferring from lower class, Albany State. Right here he played his first couple of years, went to Florida State and had an outstanding career there. Lateo Latu from UCLA, outside linebacker from Danny Fuller's favorite school. Fashanau from Penn State. They're working my tongue today. Offensive tackle. Lots of offensive tackles in this first round. He's out of Oregon State. Newton from Illinois, defensive tackle. Amarius Mims from Georgia, offensive tackle at 20. Byron Murphy from Texas at 21, defensive tackle. Nate Wiggins from Clemson, cornerback. First cornerback listed at 22. Cornerbacks usually second cornerback listed. Usually there's 5 or 6 cornerbacks in the first round. Brian Thomas from LSU at wide receiver, who I think you might go higher. Chop Robinson from Penn State at outside linebacker. Just going to go down to 32. Graham Barton from Duke, a center at 27. Xavier Leggett, I mentioned earlier, from South Carolina at 28. Darius Robinson from Missouri, defensive end at 29. Ennis Rackstraw from Missouri, a cornerback at 30. Lad McConkey, as I mentioned earlier, Georgia wide receiver. And then Tyler Guyton, offensive tackle from Oklahoma, would be theoretically, the last first-round pick if this were to go to plan. I don't see that happening because some of these guys, Keon Coleman, for instance, I can see jumping up into the first round from these rankings. Bo Nix could jump into the first round. Jonathan Brooks could jump into the first round. I think running backs are not going in the first round myself. I'm trying to think of some other guys. Ricky Pearsall, another wide receiver, could jump into the first round. Kamir Lassiter from Georgia, cornerback, could jump into the first round. I'm looking at some guys, that are ranked second round or better. He's got Michael Penix, by the way, at where do you just have him? Oops, excuse me. Michael Penix. 50. That sounds about right. Late second round, mid-late second round for Michael Penix. You hear me, Patriots? We'll dive into more draft stuff, and I'll be on with the Mac and Jack draft show, Northeast Streaming Sports draft show that night. The first round of that draft, I'll be right here in this chair for the entire show. Probably will come on, I don't know, I think we came out at 6 o'clock or something. I might have to take a couple of little breaks, but I will be on for the entire first round. So 6 hours probably that night. And I'll certainly promote it as we go forward. We'll have lots of guests. Mac from Mac and Jack does the hosting. I'll be a co-host, and we'll have lots of people coming on to talk about the picks from their teams that they cover through the night. So we'll have a lot of fun with that. I'm getting close to wrapping it up as we're not getting a lot of comments. We still got a few viewers with us live. We'll certainly replay this on all the to all the groups here shortly as well. Just looking quick at college baseball. Let me change my banner here. I'm going to go back to this. College baseball. We're getting close. We're getting close to conference tournaments starting. Regional play will start for the College World Series, and then we'll have the actual College World Series out there in Oklahoma coming up next month. Arkansas currently at 27-3 is ranked number 1. Clemson 28-3 is 2. You got followed by Texas A&M, Tennessee, Oregon State. And that's somebody we always see in that the top of these rankings. Has moved up to the number 5 spot. Vanderbilt 6, Duke 7, Kentucky, East Carolina, and Florida State round out the top 10. Wake has fallen way back. In fact, they've fallen all the way to number 14 after being ranked very high last year, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think most of the year last year, and getting to the final of the College World Series. At 11 is Virginia. UC Irvine, another team we don't necessarily see a lot of, is at 12. Carolina, Wake Forest, and Dallas Baptist, an interesting entry here at number 15, 25-6. It's going to be interesting to see how they fare once we get into this regional play and if they can become a hot story in college baseball going forward. Virginia Tech, UCF, Oregon, LSU, and Coastal Carolina are the next 5 down to 20. Wake Forest, by the way, I said at 14 or 21-10. Far off the hot pace that they set last year. The last of the top 25 is Oklahoma State, Mississippi State, Nebraska, Florida, and Alabama under their new head coach. As you remember, their old head coach had got fired as part of a gambling scandal involving, I think, DraftKings. I want to say last spring. LSU. It was involving a game between Alabama and LSU and some interesting betting trends, and the coach at Alabama was implicated in that and fired. What else? Anything else? What else do we want to talk about? You guys got anything else? Let me go to college sports in general and see what we might have as newsworthy. Who's this? I don't know what that is. Oh my gosh. We talked about a lot of these stories. So, here's an interesting story. Cal State San Marcos baseball and softball coaches were simply kidding around when they recently started discussing the idea of Jillian Albiati playing for both of them. And she did just that. They were serious. The shorthanded Cougars baseball team needed a pitcher last weekend. I think this was last weekend. And everybody knew Albiati could handle the job. So she played third base for the softball team that day and was a pitcher and pitched in the game for the men's baseball team later on that day. So she became just the second player in the history and the first in Division II, this is Division II school, to appear in formal baseball and softball games on the same day. She pitched the final inning of the opener of a doubleheader against Sonoma State on Sunday after playing third base for the softball team during the day. That's an interesting story. There you go, Chris. That's an interesting story, no? Thank you, Chris. By the way, Chris has been helping me line up a few guys for the interview show, and hopefully he'll be able to continue to find people. Chris, I wanted to tell you that I probably have, I think I told you I've got Right now, we've got Tim Worley for the 26th. We've got Buddy Biancalana, former Kansas City Royal, for the 3rd. I've got Brian Holloway, former Patriot great, one of my favorites, offensive lineman, for the 10th. I'll firm that up tomorrow. I've got a call with him tomorrow afternoon, and and then Chris has got some guys we're going to get in. Kevin mentioned some other guys as well. What's CA got here? Women's softball road to Oklahoma City. You know what? Women's softball. We talked about women's basketball and popularity versus the men. Women's softball was picking up some huge gains, I think, the last couple of years as far as popularity goes. So something to keep an eye on, as CA mentions, is how these what the rankings are for these ratings are for these softball teams. So that's about all I got tonight, guys. So I'm going to wrap it up a few minutes early. I want to thank all of you for coming in and participating tonight. And next week, we'll get in a little bit more draft stuff, some baseball stuff. Any topics you want to talk about, send me a note. We'll bring them up and do a little bit of research if we can. And we'll talk about whether we're going to take a little hiatus over a few months in the summer or not. Friday morning at 9:00, guys, I'll be on. I'll be titling the show One-on-One with Keith Engle, but we won't have an interview necessarily that day. It's going to be more of a kind of wrapping up the Are You Serious? Transitioning from Are You Serious to the one-on-one interview shows. I'll tell you a little bit about the format and some people that we've got lined up and hope to have lined up in the coming months. And we'll kick off our first interview with Marty Cordova, although it won't be at the 9 a.m. hour where the rest will be. I know it's a little confusing. It'll be 3 p.m. on Friday, but we'll do that. And Marty's going to be an interesting guest, so please tune in or catch it later on as well. We'll be sharing that to all the groups. And then Sunday we'll be on with our stream of consciousness as always. So you guys have a great night. Keith Engle for TGI Sports Talks College Sports Huddle. Have a great night.